All right. Well, guys, two tough losses for both of us. And I think in both of our games, we both missed like one move.
Yeah, I had to find only move that draws, which was pretty difficult.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe we lost in different ways, but we'll take a look because I think it's important to learn from your losses. And yeah, this was round 3 of the Reykjavik Open.
And this was a double round today, so it was
Right.
extra difficult because, you know, the energy wasn't the same.
Yeah, I think I really don't like this 9 a.m. round
Yeah,
in the
9
morning.
a.m. was a tough one.
Because the U.S., you know, we get trouble for having 2 rounds a day,
Right.
right? But this one is like 9 a.m. and then 5
Right.
p.m. It's just exhausting. But oh, I wore my Hackers jersey because it's Pro Chess
Oh, yeah.
Wednesday.
Yeah,
Hackers
good luck.
are playing for the final playoff spot. Not only do we have to win, we need another team to lose as well. So
Yep, and go Pittsburgh. I'm rooting for the pawn grabbers.
nice. I think by the time... No, we'll release this before the match. So yeah, good luck
Okay.
to everyone. But all right, so let's start with your game, yeah?
Yeah, so I was playing a very strong Grandmaster 2600 from Turkey, Ilmaz, and it started as a Grunfeld. So I decided to experiment a little bit. Normally I'm not a Grunfeld player, but why not? And he played into this popular bishop e3 line, and here I think I may have already made an inaccuracy. I thought that what I played was okay, castled followed by c5, but I think c5 may be a little bit more accurate. And there are certain lines where this actually move helps you in certain positions. And then, for instance, if he does the same as in the game, like knight f3, bishop g4, bishop e2, now I have this move knight c6, and there's no d5 because bishop takes c3 is with check. Now, if you go back to the game, I castled first, and that gave him that extra tempo. And now after, for instance, knight c6, so I took, but if knight c6, now d5, and I'll have bishop takes c3, and I'm just worse.
Yeah.
So it's very important to be knowledgeable about these nuances. But the line that I played, while may not be the most popular, I think is still pretty good. So I played all the logical moves. Takes, knight c6, d5. And now I took, and I took the exchange. So this is more or less forced. He has to take the bishop, and now he has to play bishop h6. Otherwise I'm going to play f6.
Yeah, we see this a lot in the Grunfeld, right?
And this is just a standard Grunfeld position. I took with the king to get my queen more mobile. And now both sides have their trumps. So his trump is this e6 outpost for the bishop. So he wants to mount the bishop on e6 and combine attacking ideas like queen coming to h6 and covering c8 square. So I have to act quickly, otherwise I'm going to get under a serious attack. So I activated my knight. I think this is the right approach. And he doesn't really have control of the c file, because if he plays something like rook c1, and this is what I saw during the game, I have a6 and he can't really get that knight out of the way. And if he can't get the c file, then the knight just controls all the key squares and black's fine. So that was my idea. If he starts with this move a4, so going back a move, if he starts with a4
to stop you from playing
to
b5.
stop me, then I can play a6. And then even after rook b1, I still play b5 because of the back rank problems. Queen's under attack. He doesn't have time to take the pawn. So all of this I think is fine for me. So he plays bishop e6, giving me time to finish kind of setting up b5. By the way, guys, if I play a6, that would be really bad news. Do you see the problem here? There is a really sneaky tactic that white has.
Yeah, well, if you guys don't see it, pause your video and keep thinking.
Yeah, try to figure out. My knight is on pre, that's key, and my king is a lot exposed, so there is this really tricky move. Queen c1, double attack.
Nice.
And now I am in serious trouble. So I'm probably going to get mated.
Yeah, I mean, the position looks like your king side already has some weaknesses, right? So you have to be very careful.
But with accurate moves, I'm going to patch it up. So I played queen b8 just to make sure my rook's protected if he plays a4, and now I stop any e5 pushes. And after a6, king g2, queen e5 I thought was really strong. By the way, if he ever plays this move queen c1, it's just kind of not that dangerous.
Right.
I'm going to play queen e5 next and just regroup. So I think I more or less solved all my opening problems, but the game is really complex. And now we enter this interesting position. After king g7, I got an active queen. Obviously, trade on e5 only favors me. As a matter of fact, I was going to take with the pawn. And if he ever plays f4, I can just ignore it. I can just play king g7 here. And my knight protects all the key squares.
Right.
And then I got a outside passer here. In all endgames, this b5, a6 could really be trouble for white.
Yeah.
So he played queen c1, king g7, queen c2. And now I activated my queen, and now he can't really play f4 because of knight e3 fork. So he tried to harass my queen, and I go back. And he repeated. I just want to see what he's doing. We both kind of want to see who's playing for what. So with queen e2, he's clearly playing for win, which I welcome because the position is double-edged, and his king could get just as weak when he's going to play like this f4, e5 plan, which happened in the game.
Right.
So I played rook a7, which is a good way to get to the c file. Rook d1, queen c3, rook d3. And again, he had his second opportunity to make a draw with repetition. So you see, guys, in Grandmaster chess, there's a lot of drawing lines, and we both saw it, obviously, and he decided to play for a win. So I gotta give my opponent credit for not settling for a draw, going for sharp move, f4. But now after rook c7, all of a sudden, there's gonna be rook c2 ideas in certain lines, so he has to be extremely careful.
Yeah, a lot of counterplay.
And that bishop could turn out to be totally useless because the knight, the rook, and the queen are attacking the king. And after king h3, I played a good move, queen c1, and after e5, here I played a very good move, sacrificing the knight, which I thought was a big shock for my opponent, but it turned out that he had things under control. So, first of all, guys, you had to see that after this, white is in big trouble. So if he plays queen e4, then here probably the easiest way is to checkmate using queen f1 tactic. And if king h5, now f5 wins, or more pretty win,
h5.
h5 would checkmate on the board.
Yeah.
So that would be my choice. So anyways, there's a lot of cool tactics, guys, and the really cute one that I want to share with you, I saw after queen d1. And now check, king here, and notice if I start with queen h5, the king runs away. And I'm not sure if there's actually mate. I think this is the more precise move. And now if he tries to make a run for it, check, check, if king here, it's mate. So he has to play king f3 and also gets mated. And like I said earlier, the bishop is kind of useless.
Right, the bishop's out of play.
And so his try is to maybe give up the bishop. Oops. Give up the bishop, but I think it's also losing after check, check, and now the queen comes in, and this should be beautiful checkmate, or he loses the queen.
Right.
So, anyways, both of us saw probably all this, and he played the best possible move. He didn't take the knight, he played rook d1 tempo. These are very important, guys, moves. Tempo moves, when you calculate, are extremely important. I did see this move, and I played queen c4, but now he played a really good move, queen e1. I kind of underestimated the power of that move, because I first thought he has to play queen e3, and if I move my knight here, then I'm in trouble. d6, and I'm just losing everything.
So his queen has to stay on the e file.
He has to protect the bishop. But here I saw this very nice intermezzo. So if he takes the knight, I take the rook, and if he attacks my queen, the knight is coming back to c4. I stole a little pawn, and his queen's under attack, and it looks like I'm doing quite well.
Yeah, d6, you can just take the queen, right? Or just take with the pawn?
Either one, yeah. I can probably take the queen too. So yeah, this is quite interesting. But I think I'm fine. But he played the best possible move. He played queen e1. And now, this is the most difficult moment of the game. Computer shows there's only one way for equality for me. I did not see this idea. Well, I saw the idea, but in a slightly different position. I played knight f3, which I think already is a bad mistake. And after that, I'm just probably going to lose. Queen takes a2 is the right move. Sacrificing the knight and then activating the rook. Remember, guys, activity is more important than material. So now rook takes h2 is a big threat, and if he plays queen g1, h5, and after pawn takes, notice that black is simply down a piece for 2 pawns, but his bishop can't move anywhere. If he plays d6, queen takes e6 is check, and if he plays rook a1, this is really cute tactic. Takes, and surprisingly, white's not better here. There's going to be probably some kind of perpetual at best play.
Right, well d6, queen e5 is immediately bad.
Is immediately bad, yeah. And if queen d2, queen h1.
Right.
So his pieces are really awkward, and his bishop, most important, has no moves. So most likely this would have been a draw if I would have seen it. I played knight f3, and now he played very good move queen e3. So here I considered queen a2, which I think is still the best practical chance. And now rook c2. Now he has to find the only move, rook h1. And now white's better, because now he can actually regroup, and the bishop can kind of come back. This is still not so easy, of course, for him. But there's this cute line. If he tries g3, intermezzo, queen e2, hitting the rook, and now check. And the king is almost in the maiden net, and just rook g2 wins.
Nice. These lines are so instructive because when people see an extra piece, they think it's game over. But if the piece is out of play, it doesn't really matter.
Notice the bishop on e6 is not participating.
Yeah, it doesn't control any
Funny enough, even though the bishop is not participating in all of these lines, it proved to be a vital piece in the game. He found this beautiful defensive resource. So I played... so after queen e3, I played this move, queen c3, forcing the rook out. And now this cute check. If queen takes, he'll lose the rook. The king cannot go up because he's got major problems. So after this, another check, and now he cannot block with the queen because rook c2. And if he takes the knight, that would have been a really beautiful game over. The classic back rank problem.
Right.
But luckily for him, he found the best moves. Rook d2, queen c1. And here I thought it's quite an interesting position because I thought that he can never take my knight. If queen takes, he's going to lose the rook. I'm threatening because the rook is pinned rook c2. And even though my knight is pretty much trapped, I thought all these pieces are just creating a lot of pressure. And I completely overlooked, and this isn't time pressure, we both had probably like 2 minutes or less, this move bishop g4. And surprisingly, there's no defense against bishop d1, which totally blocks the knight out.
Right.
And I'm just lost.
Yeah, it's familiar motive to cut the knight.
Yeah.
Right.
So probably the most difficult tactics or moves in chess are quiet backwards moves.
And you have to find two of them, bishop g4, bishop d1.
Yes, and he found, it's not that difficult, honestly, but he found it. So I played king f8, trying to activate my rook, because on top of it, if I try to play something like rook c3, I'm going to get mated. Actually, not queen c3, but something like rook c3. Queen takes e7, and now king h6, queen f8 mate.
Yeah.
So now my king is really weak, and after bishop d1, I can resign. So I just played a couple of more moves to see what he can do. Queen d5, again trying to win the second pawn, but with accurate move, he's not going to lose the d pawn, and king takes g1 is unstoppable, so I resign.
Yeah. Well, tough game.
Tough game, but if you want to learn more about openings, guys, don't forget to check out my website, chessopeningsexplained.com, where I talk about different openings, including Accelerate Dragon, and anything pretty much from my games that I can share with you.
Well, unfortunately, I had a tough round as well. I faced the Icelandic Grandmaster Johan Hjartarson, who's, I guess, a legend in Icelandic chess. But I felt pretty comfortable going into this game because he's not really the most theoretical guy. But he goes for principal lines, and he doesn't really try to kill you from the opening, so I figured I'd get a pretty reasonable position. Okay, I played this line with c6 and bishop f5. King's Indian players, you guys know, black has a million choices here. You can put the knight on c6, knight bd7. Lately, I've been liking this line quite a bit. The idea is to just immediately jump in with knight e4, and then a lot of times we just support the knight with d5, and we almost go into a Fianchetto Grunfeld, but black gets a lot of, I think, a lot of nice piece activity and good squares for all the pieces. This knight can then jump to f6 as well. Okay, so he played b3. I think this is all pretty normal stuff. And this move, bishop e4, is fairly important just to pin this guy and make sure that knight h4 is not going to happen on the board. So for example, knight d7, knight h4. This might be a little bit annoying for black because I'm really backed up. He can't play d5 yet because the bishop is hanging, but maybe he plays a move like e4, and black is really lacking a lot of space, like c5, I think even knight f3. I think white has a good version of this kind of structure. But okay, if you guys want to see more details about the opening, I have to plug my new Patreon page. It's in the description. You can click on the link. It'll take you to a different website. You guys know how it works, and you can check out all the details there. Well, he came up with this idea, bishop h3. And this is a pretty well-known motive. The idea is that now he wants to move the knight, and my bishop is going to be kind of stranded on e4. So if I make some random move, he plays knight d2, or even knight e1 next move, and then f3, and then the bishop is kind of stuck. So black is kind of obliged to take on f3, which I did. But I actually feel like this position after e6 and d5 is very reasonable for black. And in fact, I think black is hardly worse here. And the reason is we're playing against the two bishops, but we just have a very, very solid structure. Our bishop is a really good piece. It has a very easy target on d4. And the knight does have some nice squares, especially f6 and then e4. And if white has to play f3 to cover the e4 square, this creates new weaknesses and of course shuts down the long diagonal. So I actually felt very, very comfortable here, and I think I definitely outplayed my opponent. But I lost my mind a few moves later, so you guys will see exactly how it went down. Okay, a5. So now I'm trying to basically create a weakness on the queen side, and here I'm already kind of starting to feel ambitious because I want to play a4, take on b3, and then I'll play queen b6, and b3 is hanging, d4 is hanging, I'll have rook a3 as well. I think black's pieces, they all make sense. The light squared bishop, this is supposed to be white's strongest piece, is having a hard time finding something to do. Of course, he's always going to look for some kind of sacrifice, but it doesn't work in this case. I can take, or I can even play rook e8 and shut everything down immediately. If f5, I just take it, and we win the bishop next move. He's definitely going to be looking for some kind of break with f5, but it doesn't really work in most cases. Black can just take the pawn. Well, he played a4, stopping a4, but the problem is this runs into queen b6, and now both of these pawns are hanging. And if he plays c5, then I'll definitely take on b3, because he can't even chase the queen, because the bishop is hanging. I have queen takes a4, I have queen c4. So many escape squares, I'm never worried about my queen getting trapped here. If we go back a move, he also had a choice to take on d5 here. And it's never super clear which way black can take. C takes d5 normally makes sense just to keep everything super compact. But here e takes d5 I think would make a lot of sense as well, because very quickly I'm going to get rook e8, knight f6, and knight e4. And I think with the knight on e4, black can never be worse in this kind of position. f5, we just ignore it, knight f6. And black is good. So after queen b6, he started thinking for quite a while. He found queen d1, which I think is the only move to defend both pawns. If he plays queen b2 here, I was planning on taking on c4. And then either playing knight b6 immediately or playing a move like rook fd8 first, but probably knight b6. And it's very hard for white to defend one of these two pawns. So I think black is just going to be winning a pawn here. You can also play c5 in these positions and just immediately put pressure on d4. So black would be more than okay here, probably pushing for an edge. Well, queen d1, rook fd8, rook e1, knight f6, queen c2, knight e4. And now I'm threatening to take his bishop on c3. If he moves back, I'm also threatening the d4 pawn. So he's obliged to close things up with c5. And I think all my moves here were generally correct strategically, because I forced him to kind of close the position down, and now it's similar to my previous game where I was white and my bishop is fighting against this pawn chain and is having a very hard time to be active. So white's light squared bishop here is still quite bad. Okay, I played queen a7. Now the idea is to break with b6, put pressure on this guy, and then the queen is always going to have some ideas on the diagonal. Bishop b2, b6. And now I'm actually okay with the position opening up because I think my pieces are definitely superior here. If he takes on c6, we can take on b3. The bishop is hanging, and he just doesn't have a good move here. Queen b5, for example, we can trade and push a4, or I think just rook a b8, just keeping all the tension and all the advantages. And black's pieces are just so active here that I think black immediately takes over. Not to mention white has these pawn weaknesses. So yeah, I was definitely looking forward to playing this position. At this point, I was really getting ready to play for the win, because I think the point of no return, we're past that now in terms of white being able to play for an advantage. So he played bishop g2, and now if I take on c5, which I originally wanted to do, I think the problem is he takes on e4, takes back on c5, and this position wasn't so clear to me. I think black is probably fine, but I kind of wanted to keep my strategic hold in the position. So I go back, knight f6, and I want to go to d7. Rook e3, knight d7, and now I'm threatening to take, and then take on b2, and then win the pawn on c5. So white is forced to take some measures. He finally took on b6, queen takes b6, and he took on c6, and we ended up trading pawns because I can take on d4. He also had the choice to play rook to c3, but I have this funny move, queen takes d4. This is much better than bishop takes, because here I'm actually creating a pin, and I'm threatening to win that bishop, so white cannot take on c6. I'm just going to take on b2. So I think black is probably doing quite well here. So he took on c6, bishop takes d4, and I thought he should probably go for this position, but understandably he didn't want to give up the two bishops, so he chose not to, and he trades on b6, bishop takes b6, and he played rook e2. So this is definitely the critical moment, and I had been anticipating this position for at least a couple moves now, probably back around this moment when he played rook e3, knight d7. I was kind of evaluating that position, and I felt like black would be doing well there. And then when we reached it on the board, then my conclusion was right. I mean, I think black is doing really well, mainly because the pawn on b3 is quite weak, and white's bishop on g2 is not having a hard time being active here. Now, if I could transfer the bishop to like b5, then it's a different story. So here I spent a lot of time because I sensed that it was a critical moment, but unfortunately I made a series of pretty bad moves that I can't even imagine making now. Well, my first instinct turned out to be correct. I think knight c5 is just the best move here, just immediately attacking the pawn. And you guys will see how I kind of talked myself out of this. So the first thing is that if white plays bishop d4, we just take on b3. And then this rook is hanging on c1, and this rook is hanging on e2 with check. So this is not playable for white, and he has to defend the pawn with a move like rook to c3. And now black can continue d4, hitting the rook, or maybe rook a c8 first, I think might be more useful. And then black's next move is d4, and then white's just not going to have a good square for the rook because he has to keep an eye on b3. Black also wants to push d3, and this pawn, I mean, is being beautifully supported by all my pieces. So I think black has a serious advantage here, and white would have to be, I think, very, very accurate not to lose. But then I started looking for other options, and I figured I could play rook a8 as well. And I thought this move was interesting because if he plays the natural rook ec2, I can trade and play knight c5. And now the material has simplified, which means we've traded off a rook, which means it might be easier to promote my pawn because he has less pieces defending. And if he plays rook c3 here, well, I figured, okay, again, d4. Now the rook has to move somewhere like f3. You know, I push d3, knight e4, knight takes b3, or even just d2 is coming in. I think black is just winning here. But I actually blundered something here, so this is where I start making mistakes. It turns out he can play bishop d4 in this position. Now I thought this was not working. Knight takes a4 is a pretty simple tactic. If he takes, we take the bishop. And if he takes on b6, we take with the knight. You know, we're a pawn up in all the lines. Except, after knight takes a4, he has bishop f6. Which I did not see in my calculations, and I most likely would have blundered in the game. Although, probably not. I think I would have rechecked it and figured out the flaw. So, white is still okay because he can play bishop d4, and then black should play a move like knight to d7, and material stays equal, and I think chances are about level. But then I came up with another move that I thought was even better than those two, rook a b8, which is just a pretty weak move, I have to say. Well, the idea is to just line up the rook against the b-pawn, and I thought this was going to pose more problems. And at this point, I'm just flat out playing for the win. Like, if he offers a draw, you know, I'm sorry, Mr. Hjertersen, but I would like to continue the game, right? I think black is pushing for the edge. The idea is pretty simple. I want to play bishop c5, and then white has to figure out a way to defend b3, and then I could even drop my bishop back and trade on g7. And then one rook goes to b4, the other rook goes to b8. I mean, white's never going to hold this position. I think the knight here is definitely a superior piece if it can stay active. But there was a big flaw, and he just played simple move rook ec2, which I completely forgot about because this move was just not possible in the other lines, right? And rook ac8, white is playing this move, but then we trade and black is fine. And if we play knight c5 immediately, then white can't make this move because he would just be hanging the pawn on b3. So I completely forgot he can make this move, and suddenly if I play bishop c5, well, I'm giving up 2 pieces for the rook. And I think black is kind of okay here, but definitely at this point black is now worse because his pieces are active. His bishop on b2 now makes a lot of sense. I can't challenge for the c-file, and he can play a move like rook to c6, start rerouting his bishop like bishop f1, bishop b5, and I think black is starting to feel some pressure. So now I kind of went haywire, and I decided to go for this line anyway, bishop c5. So I figured he takes 2 pieces, but I can take on b3. Maybe I get some counterplay. But this was a pretty bad misevaluation. Here I guess I could throw in d4. This might be a better try. But white just regroups here. He's in time. Rook c2, rook d2. Let's say I take on b3, and he plays maybe bishop f6 first. Throws in this move, and now I always have back rank problems thanks to this bishop. I have to move my rook somewhere, and then next move is bishop f1, and I'm never going to be able to move my pawn. So here I think white just has a winning advantage. He can just slowly bring his king in, like f2 or f3, king f2, king e3, and then he'll round up the pawn and just slowly win the game. So I decided to take on b3 first, bishop f6, rook a8, and here is a critical moment where I basically just blundered his next move. My idea was that I'm very likely going to win the a4 pawn, and if I do win the pawn, then black is completely safe and has nothing to worry about. The 2 bishops, they're not so effective when the pawns are on one flank. But unfortunately he has bishop f1, which from afar I missed this move, and now the bishop just gets to b5. He locks everything down, he keeps this a pawn. My a5 pawn is always going to be weak, and if he ever wins that pawn, it's game over. The 2 bishops are just going to shepherd the a pawn down. So he was able to win really easily from here, and yeah, this was just a bad series of moves on my end, starting with rook a b8, where knight c5 I think was clearly stronger, and then going for this endgame I think was another bad valuation on my part. If not for this move bishop f1, I think black is okay, so we can consider this more of a tactical mistake rather than a strategic one. Of course, strategically, I understand that the 2 bishops, they always have a lot of potential to outplay the rook. But if concretely black is able to win the a4 pawn, then black should be fine. Well, you guys can check out the full analysis if you visit my page and get the PGN. And I'll just show you how the game wrapped up here. I decided to drop my rook back because otherwise he's going to put the bishop on b5, and I'm going to have some real back rank issues. For example, let's say white plays, or let's say black plays rook to b4, bishop b5. We'll make some random move h5. Now white even has this resource, bishop c6, hitting my rook. Rook c8 seems like refutes white's idea, but then after rook takes a5, we can't take the bishop because we're getting mated on h8. So because of these ideas, the position is basically not holdable for black. So I played this move, and I was hoping he would play bishop b5 because then I can play rook to c8 and force a trade of rooks. And if we trade rooks, I think white is probably very close to winning this one anyway, but I think it'll be a lot harder here because I'll put my rook on a8, and his bishops alone won't be able to win the pawn. He'll have to bring in his king, but I'll try to put my king on e7, get some counterplay going with f6, e5. Basically, it's going to be a much longer game, but white's chances are clearly better, and probably white is winning with best play. But he played rook to c7, which is a very good move, because now he's just going to put his rook on d7, and I have no way of exchanging this very active rook. So we got this bishop b5. I gave a check and came back. Basically, black can't do anything. I'm completely tied up. If rook a7, I am going to play rook a8. and he just starts bringing in his king. But I think there were a couple ways to break through here. If you guys want, you can use this position as an exercise, figure out how white should play here to try and break through black's defenses. Okay, well, during the game, and then later I checked this and it turns out to be right, I think f5 would have pretty much decided the game on the spot. The point is, if e takes d5, e takes f5, we take on d5, and then the rook will come down, and eventually the bishop will find this diagonal, and the f7 pawn is going to fall. Or if g takes f5, white has this nice maneuver, bishop e2. I was kind of expecting this during the game. I think this pretty clearly wins for white. I can try rook b4, bishop h5, rook f8, but bishop e7, and I can't defend the f7 pawn much longer. And once he takes on f7, I think black's position basically collapses. This a pawn is never going to be an issue after rook a7, and white has definitely enough pawns to win the game pretty smoothly. But his approach was good too. He just brought his king in, and basically after king d3, I played rook to c1, which is kind of a blunder, but the game is more or less over. He's ready to just kind of even bring his king in all the way to d6 and then play bishop c6, and my rooks are just going to get completely dominated. After rook c1, he found the right way exactly to trade rooks, because now when we trade, his bishop gets to d8 and he immediately picks up the a5 pawn. So this was move 31. I thought for a couple minutes and basically resigned here because the position is hopeless. We can try to keep white from making some progress, but for example, after king to c2, the rook already has to move off the b file. And I was just imagining some position like this. And I was trying to figure out, like, well, okay, what happens when the pawn gets to a7? Well, how does white win there? Well, the thing is that white just puts the king on b2 and the rook runs out of squares on the a file. So once I started seeing kind of these things, I realized it was a good time to throw in the towel. Well, that wraps up this round. This was round 3. We have a bit of a break before round 4 tomorrow, but we'll be back with more videos, and appreciate all of the comments so far. We're happy that you guys are enjoying the analysis, and yeah, if you found anything interesting or anything sticks out to you, I realize this says round 2 here. Let us know in the chat, and I think any interesting comments, maybe we'll feature them in the next video. Yeah, that's a good incentive. Alright guys, have a good one.